I remember sitting alone in my living room one evening, the weight of restlessness settling in my chest like a silent storm. Nothing dramatic had happened, no argument, no big failure, but still I felt off, like I wasn't quite myself. I paced around, then sank onto the couch, glancing at my reflection in the dark window. The man I saw there wasn't the confident, grounded version of me I wanted to be. Instead, he looked tired, weighed down, as if burdened by invisible chains that kept him from standing tall. The truth hit me harder than I expected. I was shrinking into myself, explaining things I didn't need to explain, apologizing even when I wasn't at fault. I realized I was trying too hard to fit into roles that didn't feel natural, constantly adapting, softening my edges until I barely recognized who I was. It wasn't about just feeling tired or stressed. It was something deeper, something I didn't have words for at the time, but that I felt buzzing underneath my skin, like a low hum begging for attention. There was a part of me that wanted to reclaim a solid ground, a quiet power that wasn't loud or arrogant but unmistakably present. Yet, the more I searched for it, the more elusive it seemed. I tried mimicking what others called masculine strength. The loud declarations, the posturing, the forced toughness. But all it did was feel hollow. I looked around, observing the men who seemed naturally aligned with something I hadn't yet found. Their presence wasn't a performance. It was real, steady, as if they simply commanded their space without needing to broadcast it to the world. There was no arrogance, no need to prove anything, yet an undeniable authority. I wondered how they had ended up there while I was still struggling to stop shrinking. One afternoon, a friend and I sat talking about this very thing. "It's like I'm trapped under my own skin," I confessed. "I want to stand firm, to look people in the eye without flinching, but the voices inside me keep telling me to soften, to let go, even when I know I shouldn't." He nodded, understanding but silent for a moment. "It's not about willpower," he finally said. "It's not about trying harder or acting tougher. There's something beneath all that, something that needs to be restored before anything else can take shape." That struck a chord deep inside me. What if the answer wasn't in trying to prove myself louder, but in something quieter, more internal? What if this wasn't a battle won with words, bravado, or external validation, but with a kind of energy that had been lost? As days passed, I became more aware of moments when I stepped back, too quick to apologize or explain myself, moments when I felt invisible because I let the world decide my standing. I caught myself shrinking my presence to avoid conflict, to make others comfortable, even when it chipped away at my own sense of self. There was a tension in being the man I thought I had to be, the man society expects, versus who I actually felt I could be inside. I wasn't sure where that line was anymore, or how to cross it without breaking something. But in the quiet spaces between these realizations, I noticed subtle shifts, a steadier breath, a softer yet more grounded voice, a willingness to stand a little taller even without anyone watching. It was almost imperceptible, a change that refused to shout for approval or recognition. It didn't need to. It came from a place that felt deeper than surface-level confidence. I was starting to glimpse a version of myself restored from within, not carved out by external pressure or performance. I realized then that this journey wasn't going to be about quick fixes or motivational slogans plastered across my mindset. It was about understanding something organic, something primal that had been dormant. It would take patience and curiosity to uncover what had drifted away beneath the noise of daily life. Yet, in that silence, there was promise, a quiet revolution happening inside me that, if nurtured, could reshape how I carried myself, how I related to others, and how I engaged with the world. So here I am, inviting you to step into this space with me, to acknowledge, without shame or judgment, the places where you feel diminished or stretched too thin by the need to justify yourself. To recognize moments when you shrink your presence, whether at work, in relationships, or simply in your own skin. This isn't about blame or failure. It's about honest recognition, because that is the true beginning of change. If you've ever caught yourself bending so much that you lose sight of who you are, if you've felt that whisper inside urging you toward something more firm yet natural, then you're not alone. Together, we will explore this silent shift, the kind of transformation that doesn't scream but simply unfolds when the right energy settles within. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. What you need is already stirring beneath the surface, waiting to be heard and honored. Before we go further, I want you to pause and reflect. When do you find yourself shrinking your presence or explaining yourself too much? Write it down, say it out loud, whatever feels right. This moment of awareness is your first step toward a deeper restoration, one that begins quietly but changes everything. And from here, the journey unfolds. I remember a late afternoon during a hiking trip with some friends. We reached a rocky ridge overlooking a vast, sprawling valley framed by distant mountains touching the sky. At that precise moment, the sun was dipping, casting a golden glow that made everything shimmer. As we stood there, I noticed how effortlessly one friend of mine spread his arms, taking in the expanse without hesitation. His posture wasn't rigid or forced. It was as though the landscape itself invited him to inhabit every inch of that space. Watching him, I realized that true strength isn't just about standing tall. It's about filling the environment naturally, without the need to dominate, yet not allowing yourself to be diminished by it. This kind of confidence felt different than anything I had tried to imitate before. As the wind brushed my face, I thought about how often I shrink in conversations, clouded by uncertainty, or how I might bow to expectations without awareness. Although outwardly composed, inside, my energy felt scattered, as if fragments of myself were constantly pulled in different directions. That day, watching my friend absorb the vastness without hesitation, I understood that restoring vitality means reconnecting with a powerful internal root, a center that holds firm regardless of external noise or pressure. It's a grounding that enables one to act decisively without flair or show, simply because the connection to self is unwavering. One afternoon not long after that trip, I found myself sitting silently beside my grandfather as he carved a piece of wood. His hands moved with patience and precision, shaping form from raw material, not hurriedly but with a quiet certainty. He spoke softly about how, over the years, he learned the importance of letting his intuition guide actions rather than chasing approval. The body remembers, he said, before the mind can even make sense of a thought. It struck me then that resting my energy wasn't some abstract concept but rather a process of honoring bodily wisdom, a way to release persistent tension stored deep within muscles, nerves, and breath. The calm that follows is not laziness or passivity. It's a deliberate surrender to alignment where mind and body function as a unified whole. That night, lying awake, I reflected on how often I disregarded signals from my own physical being. I pushed through exhaustion, ignored subtle signs of resistance, and traded ease for a constant push to perform. It dawned on me that my readiness to comply, justify, or over-explain stemmed less from intellectual reasoning and more from an unbalanced physiological state. Because when energy stores dip and systems run on reserve, the instinct isn't to stand firm but instead to seek external acceptance and safety. I began to see that restoring masculine vitality required more than changing habits. It demanded an intimate relationship with my own biology, learning to nurture it rather than fight it. At work, I noticed a shift when I started paying attention to how I carried myself instead of trying to be someone. During a meeting where important decisions were on the table, I caught a subtle change in my attitude. Rather than trying to persuade everyone to agree with my viewpoint, I listened deeply and spoke with less force, allowing my conviction to arise naturally from a place of calm clarity. This new approach surprised those colleagues and, truthfully, surprised me too. The absence of frantic energy was the presence of solid ground. From that groundedness, I could make choices without second-guessing or excessive explanation. I finally understood that authentic authority doesn't shout over others. It quietly guides by example because it doesn't depend on applause. One particularly challenging experience tested this newfound alignment. During a family gathering, a disagreement flared up unexpectedly. My initial impulse was to smooth things over quickly, to minimize conflict by accommodating demands that felt unfair. However, I felt a subtle resistance rising from inside, one that no longer allowed me to soften at my own expense. Instead, I took a deliberate breath, settled my body to its core, and chose to express my viewpoint calmly but firmly. The room stiffened momentarily. Some relatives looked surprised, Others seemed to respect the change. I noticed how my voice held a steady pitch, not loud or aggressive, but impossible to ignore. Not defiant, but equally not yielding. That moment marked a profound turning point. I realized that the realignment within me had shifted the dynamic. I was no longer dictated by old patterns of acquiescence. Yet, it's crucial to acknowledge this transformation didn't occur because of external motivation or a checklist of behaviors. It manifested from consistently resetting the nervous system through intentional pauses, mindful breathing, and honoring rest. Incorporating simple rituals like controlled breathwork or mindful walks helped anchor me in my body each day, reminding me that stability arises from deliberate self-care rather than frantic effort. As a result, I found decisions flowed more naturally, my gaze held steadier, and my physical responses became less reactive. My energy no longer ebbed unpredictably but moved with a reliable rhythm. Imagine now facing a situation filled with uncertainty or resistance. Standing before a crowd, entering a difficult conversation, or simply confronting personal doubt. What if the difference between retreating or moving forward wasn't determined by loud speeches or external reassurances, but by that deep-seated steadiness emerging from within? That silent force, unshakable and unpretentious, holds a power far greater than any rehearsed bravado. This is the essence of masculine restoration. Not loud declarations but subtle, unwavering commitment to inhabiting yourself fully, moment by moment. Through this journey, I discovered that reconnecting with that inner strength involves embracing vulnerability as an essential piece rather than a weakness. When the body's energy aligns, the nerves settle, and the mind quiets, courage becomes a natural outgrowth, not a forced act. The space between thought and action shortens, and the need to justify your choices dissolves. You simply act from a core of undeniable authenticity. So, I encourage you to explore practices that nourish your physical self alongside your mental and emotional realms. Notice how your body asks for attentiveness in different ways, through tension, breath, or posture. Allow these signals to guide you back into balance. As you do, the clarity of your decisions will sharpen, your gaze will become more attentive, and your entire existence will communicate a quiet authority that never demands but naturally commands respect. One evening, during a gathering with close friends around a crackling fire, I noticed something that sparked a profound shift in my understanding. As the flames danced, my friend Jake leaned back, his shoulders relaxed yet solid, exuding a quiet certainty that I couldn't help but admire. He wasn't commanding the conversation, nor did he seek approval from anyone present. Instead, he inhabited himself fully, each gesture measured and sincere. Observing him, I grasped a nuance I hadn't recognized before. True masculine energy doesn't announce itself through volume or aggression, but through an undeniable authenticity that invites others in rather than pushing them away. His presence felt like a lighthouse, steady, unwavering, guiding without forcing. That night, I found myself contemplating how often I tried to forge my identity based on external inputs. I chased validation like a fleeting shadow, adapting my voice and posture depending on the company. But Jake's effortless embodiment reflected an internal sovereignty that I yearned to discover within myself. The realization struck me that true restoration must originate deep inside, where our essence intertwines with our biology, psychology, and spirit. It's an invisible thread weaving through every cell, stitching together who we are in a way that doesn't require costumes or facades. I understood then that the source of my uncertainty wasn't a lack of willpower. It was a fractured connection to my own core. Several weeks later, I encountered a situation that demanded I step into this emerging sense of grounded confidence. My team was facing a critical deadline, the tension thick enough to slice through the air. The usual instinct would have been to over-explain my ideas or second-guess decisions, fearing missteps. Instead, I surprised myself by embracing a calm decisiveness. I voiced my thoughts succinctly and trusted my judgment without circling back to justify every point. People responded differently. I saw nods of respect replacing the usual interruptions or skepticism. The atmosphere shifted subtly, as if my steadiness was contagious, rippling outward like stones dropped into a still pond. From that experience, I discovered that true influence isn't about overpowering others with force but inviting collaboration through presence anchored in self-possession. The following day, in a quiet moment of reflection, I considered how this internal alignment rippled into daily habits. I caught myself resisting distraction, anchoring my attention on what felt essential rather than scattering it across trivial concerns. My body no longer screamed for frantic movement or constant stimulus. Instead, a grounded patience took root, allowing me to endure discomfort without retreating or losing focus. It was a subtle yet powerful recalibration of my nervous system, transforming reactive impulses into deliberate action. This transformation taught me that cultivating masculine energy isn't about brute strength or feigned dominance but cultivating resilience. Standing firm like a tree in a storm, bending when necessary but never breaking. Another crucial layer unfolded when I paid attention to my relationships. I realized that when my internal energy was depleted, I became pliable, often compromising beyond what felt right to keep peace. But as my vitality rekindled, I noticed a shift in how I communicated with those closest to me. Instead of entangling myself in explanations or apologies, I began to speak from a place of clarity and self-respect. Difficult conversations lost their intimidating edge because I no longer feared losing approval. This didn't mean I became abrasive or unfeeling. On the contrary, my empathy deepened alongside newfound assertiveness. It reminded me that true masculinity can be gentle, standing firmly while holding space for vulnerability and connection. One afternoon, during a solo hike through a dense forest, I experienced a profound metaphor in motion. The narrow trail wound through thick underbrush, forcing me to navigate carefully, choosing steps deliberately. At one point, I slipped on a mossy rock and momentarily lost balance. Instead of panicking or flailing, my body instinctively found a center of gravity, an inner pivot that stopped the fall. That physical sensation mirrored the inner shift unfolding inside me. When my internal structure aligns, I don't tumble at the first challenge. I catch myself. I stabilize. I regain composure without drama. This embodied knowledge offers a clarity that transcends intellect. It's felt in muscle memory and breath, the silent assurance that steadiness comes from attending to our whole system, not just a fragmented part. Now, consider how this applies when you face situations demanding courage, whether presenting an idea, standing your ground, or pursuing a dream. The restoration of masculine energy relieves the exhausting burden of external approval. You stop rehearsing and start living with presence. Decisions no longer feel like battles. Instead, they emerge as natural expressions of your integrated self. You carry yourself with an ease that fills the space, not by occupying it roughly, but by belonging fully to yourself. This presence shifts dynamics effortlessly, inviting respect through genuine interaction, not forced dominance. Yet, this process remains deeply personal and often invisible to others. It asks us to relinquish superficial markers of power and embrace the complexity beneath. Our biology, emotions, and instincts woven together into a resilient foundation. Unlike fleeting performances, this energy sustains over time, replenishing itself through attuned self-care and mindful connection. With each conscious choice to listen to our body's wisdom, we nurture the roots of this transformation, allowing authentic strength to blossom quietly but undeniably. In this unfolding journey, I invite you to reflect on how your daily rhythm reflects your inner energy. Are you showing up as an echo of external expectations, or as a presence forged in alignment with your true nature? Notice the spaces where resistance softens and decisions gain clarity. These subtle changes signal a restoration happening deep within, a reawakening that reshapes how you move through life, moment by moment. The hum of the city faded into the background as I found myself wandering through a quiet park just before dusk. Leaves rustled gently overhead, and the cool evening air brushed against my skin. In that stillness, my attention was drawn not outward, but inward, a stirring sensation like a low electric current pulsing beneath my ribs. It wasn't urgency or impatience. It felt less like a call to action and more like an invitation to trust something beneath the surface. I recalled the times I tried to seize control through force or flamboyance, and how exhausting that had become. Tonight, though, a different type of strength whispered, subtle and rooted in trust. Rewinding further, I remembered a conversation that shifted my perspective significantly. A mentor once told me, "Strength grows from the capacity to hold contradictions without fracturing." Initially, I grappled with what that meant. How could I be steadfast and flexible simultaneously? Then he shared a story about a river he visited in his youth. The current was powerful yet fluid, carving through rock not by brute force but by patient persistence and adaptability. The water's flow was unyielding in its direction, unwavering in intent, but always yielding to the terrain's contours. That evening, his words sank in, "Resilience isn't rigid. It's a dance with life's unpredictability, a synced rhythm of presence and surrender." Later that week, I faced a pivotal moment in a group meeting. I noticed myself clenching my jaw and tightening my shoulders, reacting instinctively to the push and pull of conflicting opinions. Instead of tensing further, I consciously softened my gaze and lengthened my breath. The shift wasn't dramatic outwardly, but internally, it felt like releasing a coiled spring. I spoke with measured calm, embracing the ambiguity of the situation instead of forcing resolution. What surprised me was how this openness encouraged others to mirror my steadiness, gradually diffusing tension. It dawned on me that embodying a centered calm, especially amidst chaos, carries a magnetic power that commands respect without demanding it. Another layer unfolded when I examined how my physical boundaries corresponded with my inner state. I recalled an evening when a friend playfully invaded my personal space, and instead of instinctively retreating or reacting defensively, I remained anchored. My feet planted firmly, my torso upright but relaxed. That nonverbal assertion created an unspoken message. I'm here, and this is my realm. The interaction shifted instantly. The playful provocation transformed into a mutual acknowledgement of presence. I realized that true presence requires congruence between inner stability and exterior expression. When body language harmonizes with intention, the way we claim space speaks volumes. On a separate occasion, amid a challenging family discussion, I caught myself resisting the usual urge to diffuse conflict by self-effacement. Instead, I took a moment to ground myself through subtle cues. A slow inhale, drawing awareness into my chest, a steadying of my gaze. I stated my perspective clearly, allowing vulnerability to coexist with honesty without diluting either. Surprisingly, my openness disarmed defensiveness, inviting others to engage more authentically. This experience taught me that genuine connection arises when boundaries are respectfully maintained, not blurred to appease. Our capacity to hold our own energy invites others in rather than pushes them away. It also became clear how crucial rest and recovery are in this dynamic. I used to interpret stillness as weakness, filling every spare moment with activity. Gradually, I learned to appreciate pauses as fertile ground where strength regenerates. One weekend, I purposely disconnected from screens and commitments, settling into long stretches of silence and slow movement. During a solitary walk, I observed the steady rhythm of my footsteps sync with my heartbeat, a simple yet profound rhythm that restored a sense of effortless momentum. These intervals of intentional stillness recharged my reservoir of availability, both to myself and to others. Building on that, I noticed a refined clarity in decision-making. Where uncertainty normally bred hesitation, a newly cultivated sense of trust urged me forward with quiet conviction. For instance, at work, I volunteered to lead a complex project I might have previously avoided. My approach was less reactive and more intentional. I listened deeply before acting, integrated feedback without losing center, and embraced setbacks as learning opportunities rather than threats. This pivot wasn't about pushing harder but about aligning action with an internal compass recalibrated through deep self-awareness and physiological attunement. As days unfolded, I witnessed a shift in how I interacted with time itself. No longer dominated by urgency or distraction, I grew more present in each moment, cultivating a patient endurance that welcomed challenge as part of growth. Whether navigating difficult conversations, pursuing creative work, or simply sharing laughter with friends, my presence deepened through an embodied stillness that carried a quiet authority. It was as if the very roots of my being expanded, grounding me in a way that made space for vulnerability and strength to coexist seamlessly. Now, consider your own rhythms, how often they are sculpted by tension or ease, contraction or expansion. What happens when you allow your body to lead without interrupting? How might your decisions shift if you tuned into the subtle language of your breath, posture, and heartbeat? By nurturing this inner attunement, you cultivate a resilient strength that radiates beyond any superficial performance. This is not a rush to power, but a steady cultivation of presence that transforms how you navigate every aspect of your life. As I sit with these unfolding truths swirling quietly within me, I sense a subtle knitting together of threads once scattered and disconnected. It feels less like an arrival and more like a delicate turning, as if the horizon before me has stretched wider, inviting me to step closer with both eagerness and reverence. The journey has unraveled itself in whispers and hushed exchanges between body and mind, revealing not isolated fragments but a living tapestry where every strand pulses with meaning. In moments of solitude, I catch glimpses of this unseen architecture shaping my presence, like a river carving its course through bedrock over centuries, persistently patient and unknowingly powerful. There's a rhythm that no longer demands loud proclamations to be felt. Instead, it drifts gently through my posture, breath, and glance. It reminds me that essence doesn't shout, but rather holds space in ways that invite others to draw near, creating resonance without force. The undercurrent of strength flowing quietly beneath daily experience has begun to reorient the way I inhabit myself and relate to the world. I recall times when I felt fragments of discord within, moments where my impulse pulled me away from being fully grounded, urging me toward distractions or doubt. Yet, with each conscious choice to reconnect with that deeper current, those doubts seemed to lose their grip, replaced by a steadying pulse that felt more home than struggle. It's as if my internal compass realigned, guiding me through complexity not by erasing tension, but through embracing its presence without resistance. The edge between stillness and motion became a fertile ground where growth could take root and flourish. There's a transformation at play here that defies the simple binaries of weakness versus strength or activity versus passivity. Instead, it navigates a fluid dance, one where vulnerability intertwines with composure, and receptivity does not surrender authority. The landscape of experience has shifted beneath me, revealing layered depths where conviction grows not from volume but from calibrated silence. With every breath settled, I find the capacity to move forward with intention that is both quiet and resolute. Along this evolving path, I've noticed a subtle recalibration of how I meet challenges, not as battles to be won or avoided, but as invitations to deepen presence. It feels comparable to a tree that bends under the wind's pressure yet remains anchored by roots extending far into unseen soil. There is no resistance to the storm's power, only an intuitive yielding that preserves core stability. This intricate balance nourishes a leadership rooted in authenticity, where influence arises naturally from integrity rather than assertion. Even in the face of uncertainty or discord, I find myself inhabiting a space where my actions grow less defensive and more declarative, not demanding validation but reflecting a settled clarity born within. The voice I carry is tempered not by external expectations but by an internal authority that does not apologize for its existence. This is not about adopting a role or crafting a facade, but allowing the true undercurrent of self to undergird every choice and posture. As I continue to trace these dimensions of existence, the boundary between internal state and external expression becomes less defined. Each movement, gesture, and glance flows effortlessly from an intrinsic place of alignment. It is a weaving together of the seen and unseen, where subtle energy guides visible change without artifice. The unfolding of this coherence ripples outward, touching interactions with a presence that speaks without words yet commands attention with ease. Reflecting on this journey so far, I sense an unfolding invitation, one that neither rushes nor lingers, but simply asks me to lean into the quiet territories within. It challenges me to relinquish the urge to perform or prove and to embrace a steadfastness rooted in being rather than doing. The space ahead pulses with possibility, not as a promise shouted from the mountaintop, but as a soft glowing ember held close, nurturing, enduring, and ready to kindle a light that transforms from inside out. The vibrations of quiet strength had been unfolding beneath my awareness for some time, like subtle roots spreading underground before bursting forth as steady growth. I didn't arrive at this place overnight, nor was it sparked by an epiphany shouted from the rooftops. Instead, it emerged through countless small moments where I paused, not out of surrender, but from a deep kind of listening to myself. In those pauses, a dimension of ownership began to coalesce, soft but unwavering, inviting me to occupy my presence with a confidence untouched by applause or judgment. I recall a particular afternoon when the sky hung heavy with clouds, threatening rain. I was walking along a familiar path, leaves damp underfoot, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a heavy droplet splattered on my bare hand, then another, as the first timid drizzle swelled into a steady shower. I didn't rush for shelter. Instead, I let the rain soak into my skin. This simple acceptance, welcoming an uncomfortable element instead of resisting it, felt symbolic of an internal shift. The part of me that used to shrink at discomfort had begun to expand, drawing nourishment from uncertainties rather than recoiling from them. It spoke of a presence that no longer depended on external conditions to feel anchored but found steadfastness within. In conversations since, this evolving sense of being has shown itself through my gaze, steadier and more engaged, and my speech, which carries an unforced clarity. I notice how when I embody this groundedness, my ideas land softly yet firmly. Opinions once met with resistance now invite genuine consideration. It's as if authenticity, uncompromised and quietly asserted, cuts through noise more effectively than any volume ever could. I've learned that the energy radiating from someone aligned internally doesn't demand attention. It commands it simply by existing fully in the moment. A friend recently remarked, "You seem different, less tangled in expectations." I smiled and admitted that I'm learning to trust rhythms deeper than frantic pacing can reach. This trust isn't naive or passive. It's a cultivated resolve rooted in intimate familiarity with myself. No longer do I bend to external narratives or stifle my voice to fit preconceived roles. Instead, I stand with a calm fierceness that honors my limits and stretches them gracefully when needed. In this space, courage becomes less about grand gestures and more about consistent, humble presence, even when no one is watching. There's liberation in recognizing that alignment grows from an inward wellspring of vitality that fuels genuine conduct. This kind of power doesn't crumble under pressure because it flows from a balanced interplay between body, mind, and spirit. When I embody this harmony, my movement loses hesitation. Decisions emerge with precision, colored by intuition sharpened through patience. It's a resource unavailable to anyone fixated solely on external validation or mimicry, no matter how loudly they proclaim strength. Walking the line between vulnerability and steadfastness has revealed unexpected depths of resilience. Embracing the parts of myself previously hidden, uncertainties, imperfections, fears, has paradoxically strengthened my foundation. The energy I draw upon can't be fabricated or borrowed. It's cultivated through attentive care of all aspects that comprise me. This nuanced power harmonizes contradiction instead of denying it, transforming potential fracture into fluid motion. As I look ahead, I recognize the path forward will invite me repeatedly to choose presence over reactivity, intention over impulse. The comfort zone dissolves slowly as I step into discomfort with open palms, knowing that in each challenge lies the opportunity to reinforce the ground beneath my feet. It's a quiet revolution, lived moment by moment, where silent shifts in posture ripple outward, reshaping relationships, choices, and ultimately, identity itself. If I had to offer one piece of advice to anyone navigating similar terrain, it would be to honor the slow unfolding within. Resist the temptation to rush what cannot be hurried. Allow your body and mind to settle into symphony, trusting the wisdom that arises when energy is restored and stress melts away. This journey isn't about becoming a louder version of someone else's ideal. It's about rediscovering an intrinsic voice so rooted that its echo resonates without effort. So, when doubt creeps in or old habits push for familiar compromises, remind yourself of the inner well that runs deep and clear. Draw from it regularly, and watch how the necessity to seek permission or approval fades into irrelevance. This presence, born of restoration and quiet confidence, will carry you through every storm and calm alike, transforming the seemingly ordinary into the profoundly authentic. And in that transformation, you will find the kind of power that doesn't just alter moments, it reshapes a life.